Hello, men. Welcome to Messages for Men. My name is Brad Domba, and I'm your host. I'm excited to have you here again today. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I've actually been requested to talk about, and that is porn in men and its effect. Now, before you click off the video, because you think this is about shaming men, or I don't want to hear any more about porn, please know that this isn't about shame. I want to talk about it from perspective because I have a guest here today who's a licensed professional counselor, Kent Miller, by the way. We want to talk about it from the perspective of prevalence, how common is porn today, kind of how it affects men, how men kind of get stuck because of porn, and what we can do about it in order to get better to kind of unwind what's been wound. So first of all, I want to thank Kent. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Kent, just so you know, Kent's been practicing as a therapist for 25 years, I think you said.
Give or take, yeah.
98% you said of the clients you treat, it deals with pornography.
That's correct. Or something to do with sexual brokenness.
Okay.
Compulsive, unwanted sexual compulsive behavior.
Yeah.
But primarily, we can really narrow that down to porn.
Okay.
For our discussion.
So I'm imagining that statistically, it's a lot of guys.
It is a lot of guys.
Yeah.
It is a lot of guys.
So kind of explain to us the narrative around the clients that you do see.
Thanks. Thanks. So for the past 25 years, I've worked with an organization that was our demographic. We marketed to that demographic. We sought after that demographic. We knew that there was a lot going on in that demographic. So I worked with couples where the husband or the male partner would be looking at pornography. I've also worked with single people of all ages throughout the whole spectrum, and they also have had an experience of looking at pornography, that they no longer wanted that for some reason. A lot of these couples or a lot of these guys, they came to us because they were in a crisis. Okay. So part of the task was to get them out of the crisis.
Okay. So do you view as a therapist today, because I know, for example, DMS-5 doesn't label porn addiction as an addiction. It's more of a behavioral compulsion. What is your view on that? Why isn't it labeled an addiction?
The primary reason is you're not ingesting anything. So the creation of the chemicals is all already within inside of you. And so they just decided it didn't meet their standard. So many people have tried to fulfill the obligations. So when you try to put a diagnosis in the manual, you have to meet a bunch of criteria.
Right.
The governing body didn't feel like it did. So there may be, because we were talking before about how you feel like that's a detriment to people who are seeking for help, because then there's no diagnosis of sex addiction really.
Yeah, I think we, as a society, we need to recognize, because when you look at the characteristic of traits of addiction, porn can fall into all of those typically. And when we hide behind compulsion only and not talking about addiction, I don't think we put it to the forefront in society as what a problem it is, especially for men.
Right.
Furthermore, for example, when you go to your doctor, let me just put it this way, and you get a diagnosis under ICD, one of their coding mechanisms, you can be diagnosed for alcoholism, correct? And the doctor may say, Kent, do you drink? Kent, do you smoke? Kent, do you use illicit drugs? When was the last time you had a doctor say, Kent, do you view porn?
Well, I haven't seen a doctor in a long time, but that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen?
No, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, we've got literally, Kent, millions of men who struggle with porn as an addiction that affects our lives. And if I could put this into relevance real quick, there was a 2021 survey that talked about self-imposed addiction for men between the ages of 18 and 64. And 10.3% of those men identified as self-identified as addicted to porn. Now, if you extrapolate those numbers out, that's approximately 12.7 million men. Now, this is 18 to 64. If you look at adolescents, it's probably closer to 16 to 17 million men. Huge numbers.
Huge numbers.
Huge numbers of men. In fact, one of the other statistics that I was reviewing that's kind of interesting in terms of prevalence was that 57% of men, once again, 18 to 64, have looked at porn in the last month.
Right.
So Ken, all I'm saying is the prevalence of porn is dramatic. I'm not saying it's where, let me say, alcoholism is or alcohol abuse or illicit drugs may be at in terms of pure numbers. But it does have the potential because, from what I understand, and maybe explain more about this, the wiring of the brain in terms of the neurotransmitter and how dopamine is transmitted throughout the brain and the dopamine trap, it works very similar to the way cocaine and amphetamines operate in terms of addiction. So we've got something out there in terms of porn that operates chemically in the brain, very closely mimics what cocaine or amphetamines operates, but yet we don't identify it as an addiction.
Well, we'd have to, and we should probably do this at some point. We should have a working definition of the word addiction. So everybody uses the word, and sometimes I get concerned that a word can be overused, and so everything can be, right? Everything. It's like the word love. Well, I love cheese. I love the Broncos. I love the Lord. I love my wife. I'm using one word, love, a variety of meaning. So one of the things in our current culture is the word addiction. So we kind of have to decide what the definition is going to be. So when somebody says, I'm addicted to cocaine, what's the definition for that person? And when I'm addicted to porn, what's the definition that that person is using? So because the culture, the industry, we had talked about the $1 billion industry that porn is.
43 billion, yeah.
Go ahead and say
43.
Okay. 43 billion a year, is that what? Okay.
Annually, yes.
43 billion, get that number. Now there is another industry, and we would call it the recovery industry, where there's a lot of people in this side of the industry. Everybody agrees on the word addiction for that there's an addiction, whether it's a DSM, whether somebody can be diagnosed that from a doctor. People are in agreement that this is going to be called an addiction. But again, then, I want to define it. I'll give you a story. So, in my estimation, addiction is what somebody uses. So if I have a headache, I go to the medicine cabinet and I get something out of the medicine cabinet and I use it to get rid of my headache. So that's, in my estimation, addiction is medication. So a brand new guy who struggles with alcohol, he walks into an AA meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous. He sees somebody sitting there. It's the guy that has the key to the room. The guy with the key to the room has been there forever. He says to the new guy, hey, what's your name? Oh, my name's Kent. Well, what are you doing here, Kent? And he's a little gruff that way. What are you doing here, Kent? He says, I say, man, I got a problem with alcohol. He says, maybe. You have got a problem, but you decided that alcohol was your solution to the problem. So that's where I believe addiction has the elements to be able to work with. Because if you say, I'm addicted to porn, I would say that's your medication. What's the problem? And so the idea about addiction is that there's an underlying relational, spiritual, philosophical, existential problem that somebody is medicating that with the usage of whatever, gambling, food, porn, alcohol. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. I probably, in kind of some of the research I've done,
For sure.
I would probably view addiction more as, number one, it's a loss of control. In other words, you just have difficulty saying no. Number two would be escalation. Are you, in the form of porn, are you considering and looking for novelty, things new and more intense porn consistently? Number three would be tolerance, because or what you're looking at now doesn't provide the same dopaminergic response that you have been getting in the past. And so you develop a tolerance to that, much like a drug addict, quite frankly. And then also have some form of withdrawal. Is there a form of withdrawal from porn that men experience? And I think there is. And the last thing would be you continue the loop again. So that's kind of how if I was going to summarize addiction, that's kind of how I would think of addiction. And that's why I believe that porn falls into the same addiction criteria as substance abuse, alcohol abuse, gambling, whatever the case is.
And that really is a good definition. Those 3 or 4 or 5 components of tolerance, of you know that it's wrong and you can't stop.
Right.
You can't stop without help. And so that is where the recovery industry has then positioned itself to provide the help. That if somebody wants to, needs to, is forced to stop a behavior, that we would be available to help. So the therapeutic side usually is when somebody calls for help, or they're in need of help, or they're in a crisis, that's the place that we step in.
But I can't help wonder, Kent, if when you take a look at porn, whether you want to look at it as compulsive behavior or an addiction, I can't help but wonder if it's a far-reaching, more expansive problem that society actually identifies with. In other words, and it's easy to take a blood alcohol content to know if you've been drinking.
Right.
If it's easy to do toxology reports to see if you've been taking opioids, for example. When you look at porn, though, it's difficult to assess many times whether somebody is an addict unless you have some type of communication with that person to identify that. And I think that's one of the problems in society. We have no benchmarks or markers to say you're an addict or you're not. But I do believe and think and talk my conversations with men, it is a major problem and more significant than which society really has a grasp of.
Yeah. Well, you and I, what's so great is you work with a certain population group. You work with the pre-crisis group, the guys that are curious about, am I doing this? Should I be doing this? So my experience, my heart indicates that this is including a moral issue. It's a moral problem, meaning we know that it's not okay. Somehow we know. We don't. Our teller tells us. Yeah. The spirit that lives within us tells us that when I do that, it's really not okay. But I do it anyway. What is that about? It's cognitive dissonance. It's figuring out how to make it not quite so bad. So the idea then of this is a moral issue where sometimes the other addictions might not be viewed. I might overeat potato chips. I might be addicted to potato chips. Does anybody really care about that? Probably not. I came from a food family. We medicated with food. Mm-hmm. So if you're hungry, eat. Angry, eat.
Depressed,
lonely, eat. Tired, eat. Stressed, I'm going to eat. Sugars and carbs. Did anybody really, is that a moral issue? I suppose it could be, but for most of the time, it's a compulsion issue, or it's I want to numb something out. With pornography, it's just as difficult because I believe it's so embedded into morality and the God that is in us. So even this morning I was reading, and this is what I came across in Romans chapter 13, and verse 14, but clothe yourself with the Lord Jesus Christ, the Messiah, and make no provision for indulging the flesh. Put a stop to thinking about the evil cravings of your physical nature to gratify its desires and lust. So the components for pornography are very, very detrimental. So when somebody comes on my side, you get to have conversations pre-therapy. You might even say to some of your guys, you might want to call somebody. I'm on the other side where guys are usually in trouble. Somebody's upset with them. They're in a crisis. So now I kind of have their attention. And the effects of that on themselves and another person are far-reaching. You and I had talked earlier about, can we quantify the effects of what is going on with pornography, addiction, and men, and where we're heading? Would you want to speak to some more of that? I thought you did a really good job on that.
Well, so when you look at pornography, even from, I think the first pornographic video that came out in 1915,
1915.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was penetration. Since then, look where we are now. And if you want to take a look at pornography, is not linear. It's more like a hockey shape. In other words, it kind of takes off. It's ramped up in the last 20 years at a very steep rate. It makes me wonder where the next 20 years of pornography is going. Now we have the ability with AI, from what I understand, is you can actually customize that fantasy for the person, how it looks, her facial expressions, her body, her voice tone, her personality, and everything. In other words, you can create and simulate your own fantasy within that. We also have something called virtual reality, which you've got the goggles you can put on and put yourself in a realistic simulation with a woman. We may get to the point in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised next 20 years, where we have robots, female robots, for example, that look very realistic. They can talk to you, tell you exactly what you want to know, validate you, at the same time provide sex. In other words, men are escaping the intimacy that they need and require. We are escaping as a society. Men are bailing out in many regards on the relational part. And I think porn is a major component.
Absolutely.
When I talk about men's issue in Messages from Men.
Absolutely great.
And I've come to the conclusion, quite frankly, when I talk about loneliness, which the Surgeon General has said that loneliness is an epidemic in this country, equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But I think it's...
Well, that's awesome. How did they get the...
Who knows?
Yeah.
But he announced that.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at men, it's more prevalent in men. When you look at men who are numbing out, checking out, have nothing to do with women, out of the dating scene, fearful of the dating scene, are not motivated, cannot get off their couch, cannot get things done, are not building. We're not being masculine in ourselves and who we are. Part of that, a large component of that, Kent, I believe, is due to porn. And it's how much porn that we look at. Because when we constantly get a dopamine hit from porn, and I think, so there's a podcaster out there, Andrew Huberman, who I watched and talked about the difference in dopamine spike. And I think you might find this interesting. He talked about food. Food presents about 150% increase in dopamine. When you talk about video games, that's about 200%. When we take a look at porn, and sex is about 200% as well. When you look at porn, it's between 300 and 400% increase
in dopamine.
Okay. Cocaine, about 400% increase in dopamine to 450. So once again, when you take a look at the spike of dopamine and how it synthetically, we're providing dopamine hits,
absolutely,
that cause a crash, quite frankly, in dopamine. And what does it leave men? Exhausted, tired, brain fog, without ambition, with no motivation, no drive, angry, depressed, anxious. No wonder we're not connecting with one another.
Right. Well, let me read. That was awesome. But to your point of, is it an addiction, or what happens in the brain?
Yeah.
So clinicians, we're not really the researchers. We quote the researchers.
Sure.
So the dopamine hits. And so I'm just going to read this by Dr. Sherry Keffer. And I'm getting this from a book that just came out recently, and it's by the Barna Group. And Barna has been around for a very long time, and they gather statistics. So, and they did this in association with another group called Pure Desire Ministries. So this is very, very good. But I'm just going to read you the question that was asked of this doctor, and then how she responds. How does the brain respond to love, sex, and pleasure? Why does pornography consumption have such drastic psychological effects? She answers, the science of pornography begins by looking at brains as super biocomputers with 86 billion neurons and 100 trillion connections that work together to shape emotions and relationships. Process addictions, such as digital gaming, gambling, and pornography, use chemicals sourced and stored within the body. When the brain consumes pornography, the body's adrenaline, dopamine, the feel-good drug, high-powered hormones used to create long-term memories and bond us to others. And the icing on a cake, endorphins, a pleasure enhancer. Together, these form a cocktail of neurochemicals that hook brains into craving more.
Yeah, and the reason, and I thank you for sharing that. And I think the reason that, in my mind, that porn is so dangerous to men is it's an addiction where you don't have to do anything. It requires no work and no effort. If you're an alcoholic, Kent, what do you got to do to maintain that alcoholism? You're going to have to get in your car. You're going to have to drive to the liquor store. That takes time, energy, and effort.
Right.
You're going to have to put out some money to spend to buy the alcohol.
Right.
When you look at porn, it doesn't require anything.
Right.
It just requires a phone, basically, tied to the internet. And that's all. So when you look at the danger of porn and the access 24/7, there's no bartender who says, I'm cutting you off now.
Right.
There's no age limit. There's no really controls around pornography. I don't know about you, but my first access or viewing pornography was when I was in 5th grade, about 11 years old.
So you were 11, I was 8.
Okay.
We had limited access.
Yeah.
So my father owned a fourplex. You know what a fourplex is?
Do.
Okay.
I'm old enough to know that.
And we would go in and clean it. I was 8 years old. He said, grab that box, take it to the incinerator where you burn stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Big box, little person. Big steps, fall, box opens up, porn. Okay.
From your dad?
No. From
whoever lived there.
The renter.
Okay.
Okay. I saw it. It was like, okay. Powerful. I hit it. And I was willing to go back to that fourplex as often as I could. Okay. Now, I didn't have any other access for a long time, right? Access. You were at 11. You could say the next time you did it. But one of the things is then, it's like the ice cream thing. You begin, like, I wasn't like I was wounded. I wasn't lonely. I was an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're curious.
Eventually, now, it's the ice cream effect. So now I like ice cream. And when I'm bored, I think I'll eat ice cream. When I'm angry, ice cream. When I'm hungry, ice cream. When I'm stressed, ice cream. And eventually there's a shift. And the ice cream becomes the medication for the dysregulation of the person.
So porn is the same thing.
Porn is the same thing.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So everybody kind of wants to think all of us are broken, but there's way too much emphasis on that the sex addict or the porn addict is the person who was violated. Well, maybe, but you got a whole lot of people out there that didn't have any violation at all. But eventually that ice cream, that porn, it just medicates whatever place that if you're bored, if you got a Friday night, got nothing to do, nobody's calling me, okay, I'm going to have a little party with myself. So that is how it shifts into what I would consider the addiction. It medicates that stuff that you didn't have. Everybody, by the time they're 18, we're disappointed, right? We got our feelings hurt.
Got rejected.
It's Eldridge's version of Wild at Heart. Like everybody's got a wound. Okay, everybody's got a wound and the wound is not healed. So therefore, how do I medicate the wound?
Yeah.
That's how it shifts into an addiction.
I'll tell you something funny for me. I told you I was 5th grade. I was like 11 when one of my friends stole was a penthouse from his dad, and we all went to it was a rock bottom ditch.
I love that.
This dry ditch
Yeah.
we all went to, and we observed and watched it. Something else I remember, talking about ice cream, you go back to, I remember when I was probably 14 or 15, we lived next to a psychiatrist, and he was psychiatrist for the prison system where I grew up. And my dad every now and then would go over there, and he and George would just chat and talk, and my dad would help him with projects. I found myself wanting to go over there when I never did before. Do you know why? Because George had Playboys out on the footstool.
No.
So when they were trying to fix something,
Cement.
what's Brad doing? He's looking at Playboys.
Yeah.
So I can see how the seed of pornography can start young and continue to perpetuate, where men have a problem getting out of that at some point because it starts young and it continues to grow.
Okay. So you got somebody 11 or somebody 15. 15 is probably a pretty common age now with phones. Okay. So the theory is what you look at, and well, I'll just tell you, what you look at while you get aroused and what you have an orgasm to, what you're looking at is what you will have a tendency to bond or attach. It's an attachment theory. So if I'm looking at this while I'm aroused and have an orgasm, that's what I'm going to attach to. So guys that I work with, they've had thousands. Thousands is not a lot. Thousands is not a lot. So they had 1,000 sexual experiences looking on their computer screen at a particular image. They bond to that. Along comes the female that they're going to marry. They're not bonded to this. They're already bonded,
they're bonded to the
this.
Screen.
Right. They're bonded to a type. Okay, so then the dude, all the dudes think it's just going to go away because they have a real person. But it doesn't. Yeah. So they're bonded over here, and then they have a problem in their relationship. When that problem happens, the person goes back to this.
Right.
And that can happen early on in a relationship. So it's an attachment theory. So again, that would be, we didn't touch on that, but that would be something for you to think about.
And I can see how men too, when you look at a relationship with a woman, you become, let's say, bonded to that image or whatever you're looking at. And let's say the woman doesn't perform like they see on screen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the number of erectile dysfunction in men today, 35 and younger, more and more physicians are seeing erectile dysfunction because men can't perform, because they're used to performing to screens.
Right.
And now when intimacy occurs and they have to perform with a woman they love, they struggle to do that.
I see a lot of that.
But we have so much availability to look at porn 24/7, any time of the day, to get the dopaminergic response and the dopamine hit that we're desiring and looking for.
Right.
And the brain is constantly looking for homeostasis. In other words, if you bombard it with dopamine and then you bottom out and you're feeling exhausted, tired, brain fog, and you just don't feel well about it, the mind says, give me more. I've got to reach homeostasis. I've got to get back to where we were, where we feel good. So it's in a way encouraging you. And one of the problems we have today is we've got such an issue with the algorithms, just so you know, Kent, what I see in terms of social media. We become so scientific in terms of how we get young men hooked on pornography and the algorithms that basically science is using to keep them hooked and maintained in pornography, that it's difficult for many men to get off of that because they keep searching for more and more.
That's right. That's right.
So Kent, another one I want to kind of just discuss, just so we're aware of, is something called OnlyFans. And I can't speak, I don't know a lot about it. From what I do understand, it's subscription where you can pay girls, and there's a lot of girls apparently on it, to perform any type of sex acts that you want to see.
It's tragic.
At this, and we're talking, well, let's just get down to numbers. In the US alone, in terms of OnlyFans and porn sites, we click on it's over 1 billion a year in the United States. It's about 100 million clicks a month, 2 to 3 million a day, which includes all of like Pornhub, OnlyFans, and some of the other sites. So once again, I think it's a hidden addiction. I think it's a hidden compulsion that we in society have not faced and have not been willing to face the problems because we don't see it physically. In other words, if you're a drug addict, I begin to see you strung out. You show up in the ER hospital. We have the burden of the hospital. We have the burden of increased crime. We have the burden of increased violence, for example. That's not the way porn works. But my point, Kent, in my view, it's just as destructive to men in terms of what they can accomplish and do and how they're able to do it. And it takes away men's ambition to truly be who they want to be and who they desire to be.
So that's where I would go back again to the moral aspect of this, because it really does feel like this isn't random. Like it looks like there is a plan, because where are we heading? You and I had talked about your thoughts about 20 years from now, or like just the lack of motivation, the lack of the ability for some of these younger men to integrate, to have conversations with humans.
Right.
But that's always been the concern. Okay. And 1 in 36 now humans struggle with autism, where it used to be 1 out of 1,000. And those autistic folks, where are they going to spend most of their emotional time? They're not relational. So what do? They're online. Yeah. They're online. So the autism, it used to be the Asperger's, now it's called, the whole thing is autism spectrum. But that's a really big deal, because a lot of these, here's what's happening. So when I talked to this guy, I said, do you want to be married one day? He's 20. I said, do you want to be married one day? He said, oh yeah, I want a family. And I said, well, the way things are going for you right now, that will not happen. That will not happen because of your involvement with pornography. It will prevent you. It will prevent you on 2 things. One of them is your motivation to even begin to date, because you don't need to. Number 2 is when a female kind of interviews you at the DTR, they define the relationship, and now these young women, they kind of know. They've all been affected somehow by boyfriends and pornography. So they ask the guy, why don't you tell me your relationship with pornography?
Wow.
That's what's happening now. So those guys would like to be able to say, well, I used to. Yeah. And then the female should say, well, how long ago really is used to? When was used to? Is that a week? Is that a month? Is that a year? Because we all know there's so much pornography out there and so many guys consuming it at a very young age.
And can also say, I don't think you beat pornography.
Good point.
I don't think you beat pornography. I think that you have to learn to overcome. You win on a daily basis.
Well, let's talk about this then. Yeah. We'll begin the process of talking about how, if we both have people that we work with. You have the pre-therapy guy. I have the therapy guy. He wants out. The young men that are saying, I don't know if this is normal. I just don't feel good about it. I like that person. I don't feel good about it. They cognitive dissonance themselves out of that, just like junk food. We all know junk food's not good for us. Why are we buying it? Why are we eating it? Why are we spending a lot of money on it? We cognitive dissonance that it's not quite so bad. Because I want it, because it tastes good, it's quick, I only have $1, I'm in a hurry, I'll work out later, I just worked out. All of these are cognitive dissonances. The same thing with pornography. Well, what? I'm lonely, I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm stressed. I'm so stressed. I can't go to sleep now without this. So that's what's happening in that person's mind. They don't need people, they want people, they don't know how to do people. So here we go, they're 20 years old. You meet with the 20-year-olds pre-therapy. I meet with them when they get caught or when they're like, I got to have some help with this. So what are we talking about then? Well, the number one thing is access. What are we going to do about access? So everybody that has a cell phone, that has a smartphone, not a smartphone, almost every phone has the ability to have a porn store.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, Ken, because we in society have got to figure out where we're going to go with this. I mean, there is limited access supposedly to alcohol. You got to be 21 years of age.
Right.
There's limited access to tobacco. You've got to be 21 years of age.
At least deterrence.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But really, I think there are more and more countries that are trying to put, let's say, a stipulation around it. You have to prove, for example, that you're 18 or older before you can access the website. And the studies have shown it's actually shown a decline in access to it because nobody wants to put their name out there that they're enrolled in this porn site, for example. And also, I think in the U.S., that's probably also happening as well. Some states are regulating more and more of it, which I think is a good thing because, young men who have access, especially young men who have access to a continuous stream of porn and continuous stream of dopamine are going to continually seek that. And I think the far-reaching effects are a little bit different than being addicted to food, for example. I mean, a food addiction versus porn addiction. I mean, men lose their ability to become men and who they want to be. And I see men numbing out. I see men giving up. I see men quitting. I see men checking out of society, checking out the workforce, checking out of the dating scene. And we talked a little bit about this, but one of my major concerns is when you look at the population basis. I mean, we're not supplying the population that we need in the U.S.
That's right.
I think the average family needs to have about 2.1 children. Right now, we're about 1.6 to 1.7. So at this rate, it's going to be a reverse pyramid at some point where you've got a small number of young people supporting a large number of older people. That's economically, that's a society doomed to collapse and failure.
Right.
So we've got multiple problems associated with it. We've got men checking out. We've got men that are basically not motivated because of porn. We got men that are engaging not in intimacy, but they're engaging in porn in order to get whatever sexual relief they want and need. We've got a population crisis potentially. And I think furthermore, when you look down the line at 20, 30 years from now, we don't know where porn is going, but it could be to the point where men check out entirely. And we're going to say, where are men today? Men are gone.
Right.
And I think a society is built by men, the infrastructure by men and what we do and the masculinity we provide. It's not that women don't have an important role, because they do, but a society without men is doomed to failure. And I think we're going to get to the point potentially, and I think porn is a major contributor to this, where we no longer have a society of men. We have a society of men who've been neutralized. Let's put it that way.
That's right. I think thank you. I agree with you. That was well said with great passion. So I appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate that. I think one of the things for me that has been emotionally a realization is that porn has become, like we use this word, normalized. So I'm a faith-based guy. The Word of God is important to me. How people grow spiritually is important to me. Well, one of the things that I would notice is that the big factor is I can still have my faith the way that I want it to be, and I can look at porn. So there was a day that a young man came in and he had a faith-based shirt on. You could see that it was faith-based. Mm-hmm. And I said, so it looks like your faith means a lot to you. And he actually wept. He's like, it means everything to me. But then I said to him, well, why are you here then? If that is so prevalent for you, why are you here? And I said, could this sentence be true? I love God and I love porn. Those two things now almost feel like you can have them in the same sentence, whereas you used to not be able to have those in the same sentence. So what we're trying to do is porn has become so normalized, meaning I can look at porn, like this book is really also referencing pastors. Many, many, many pastors struggle with pornography. Mm-hmm. Now, they're really going to be doing it kind of silently, because who are they going to tell? Mm-hmm. So part of my passion is to reach and be available to those pastors who are struggling with the usage of pornography. So 61% is what this book says is the current rate. So every time somebody stands up in a church building and looks over their congregants, about 61% of those men have looked at porn probably within the last week. So the topic...
Let's put numbers to that.
Yeah.
Just so you understand. And I know we throw numbers out there and sometimes it's meaningless.
But you like numbers.
I do. Because it's meaningful to me. But if you said 61%...
Yeah.
And there's approximately, in terms of men, there's approximately 100 to 104 million men in the U.S. That's 61 million men.
Right.
Think about that in just terms, that's more people that live in Texas, in California. Those numbers are enormous. And that's what my point would be, Kent, is I don't think we truly understand the enormity of which porn has caused to the detriment of men.
So let's maybe expand on that because it's not, are we both in agreement? It's not neutral.
Right.
Right? It's not neutral. And so if we view it as, well, you can or you can't or whatever, I think that I want to take a stand of it's not neutral. I'm trying to get guys to 0.
Right.
I'll find out how many times they look at porn each week. I'll ask them, well, how many times do you look at porn? 3 to 5 times. Okay, we're trying to get that to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it might take a little bit, and it might take a variety of experiences that we have to do with those guys, counseling-wise. But basically, the number we're looking for is 0. Okay. Now, what if we, like the guys that are 3 to 5 a week, 3 to 5, that's pretty common. What are the effects on that person? You've mentioned some of them, but maybe let's try to get a list of 3 to 5 things.
Sure.
Well, I'll start here
Yeah.
because this is the therapeutic side.
Okay.
It affects their relationships.
Absolutely.
It affects their relationships. So I worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of couples where the guy viewed pornography. He got caught. Most of the guys get caught. They're not calling me up because they want help. They get caught by their spouse, and the wife says, we're not doing this anymore. We're not doing this anymore. The effects on her is part now of the recovery industry, betrayal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Betrayal trauma, the trauma that goes onto that person. How about children? How about children? For the dads that are looking at porn, does it affect their children? Now, the theory would be, one of those theories is theoretical. Well, if I do a behavior and you don't know about it, does it affect you? Well,
if a tree falls in the woods and you don't hear it.
Yeah. So the idea is this dad is not the best dad. Why? Because he's looking at porn. Is he the best husband? No, he's not. So that's who I've worked with all this time. How about these young guys?
Well,
I got
yeah.
35-year-old guys that are single, don't want to be single anymore, have had 15 years or more of pornographic usage. So they haven't needed women. Now they're 35 and they're going, I don't want to be single. They don't know how to relate. So it's a big, big deal, just in terms of the relationships. What do you see as a detriment?
So first of all, I don't take on any of the numbers you do. I have 3 or 4 guys I may talk to on a fairly consistent basis. It's not a lot. Some of what I'm talking about is through comments that I've seen, conversations I've had with younger men and men about pornography. But I can tell you that every man I've talked to, I've asked them, have you viewed porn? And the answer is always yes. 100% of the time. At some point in their life, they viewed porn. And some men will admit to me that porn has become a bigger issue in their life. They may say it's not an issue where I feel like I'm addicted, but I wonder if it's becoming more and more of a problem because I desire it more and more, and I seek it more and more. And this is the trap that I get concerned about. I don't necessarily blame men all the time, Kent. I think, once again, I'm going to go back to the algorithms and how social media is structured. It's almost a dopaminergic loop.
I love that.
Desire and hook.
Dopaminergic.
That gets into you that men have a hard time separating themselves from because it's the excitement. It's not necessarily the sex, but it's the potential possibility. It's what men may seek because of how they feel. It's a coping mechanism for a lot of men. They get triggered by something, a long, hard day. I feel exhausted. I know that porn makes me feel better. I'm not going to snort cocaine, but I'm willing to, because it's not a bad thing. It's normalized. I think I'll look at porn again. But the problem, Kent, as I see it, is we continue as a novelty viewing experience. We want more and more of it, number one, and we want more and more of the harder stuff, number two, and then we cannot seem to separate ourselves from it. And then it's a spiraling effect of men that's destructive.
Absolutely. So one of the things that AA has really paved the road for the remaining addictions that are out there. And now the 12 steps are public domain. So everybody is kind of globbed on to the 12 steps.
Right.
AA has been around since 1936, and they really have done a nice job of, like, again, preparing the rest of us to be able to stand on the shoulders of those guys. So the idea, though, is that it's not neutral. They are going to need some help. How do we give them the help? Access is a really, really big thing. How do we do that? Because I know that you have a great passion and are very concerned for the next generation, for the young men who are 20 to 25, 20 to 30. And so this discussion that you've been having with them, are you feeling like they'll go seek help? Are they asking you, they're seeking help?
It's more of me drawing it out of them. I don't know if they're seeking help. They are identifying it as a potential issue.
Yeah.
But men don't seek help until it's the final resort.
Or they're in a crisis, right?
Correct.
Or they get caught.
Exactly.
Right. So that girlfriend catches the boyfriend looking at porn. She doesn't like that, perhaps. She threatens, she hurts. She's very, very hurt. They even think that she has a possibility of what they've added.
Right.
In the industry of recovery, they've taken the liberties, they do take liberties of adding, so they consider a person who has been affected by a partner or a spouse looking at pornography as that they might even have PTSD. Now they call it complex PTSD.
Yeah, there's a difference.
I mean, it's a big, big world now. Okay, now I want to share this with you. What AA did for us is they had all of these terminologies, all of these rituals, really, really good, but they would say, the word HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We added two, stress and boredom. So if you look at the culture today and the phones, right? The phones, what do they provide? They provide a medication for hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, and bored. So what are we going to do with those guys? So access, I worked with this kid, beautiful kid. He was in this college prep high school. His parents noticed that he was looking at porn. They said, not on our watch. We're not doing this. So they shut everything down. So I met with that kid. They wanted me to meet with him. I met with him every 3 weeks. I would say to him, how's that porn thing going? He goes, great. I go, great. And I'm applauding him and thinking I'm pretty good. In here, I'm a pretty good therapist. And he's a pretty good kid. And he goes, wait. I have no access. I go, okay, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Hey, how's that porn thing going? Great. This is awesome. Way to go, man. He goes, wait. I have no access. Third time, 3 weeks later, I say, how's that porn thing going? Great. I go, awesome. He goes, you're an idiot. I have no access. What's our problem with that? He's going to have access again one day. One of the dilemmas that we're trying to teach guys is to live in a world that has access.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, when I'm talking to guys, and I'm no therapist, that's for sure, I'll tell young men is, well, what do I do? In other words, you are addicted, whether you like to admit it or not, to the dopaminergic effect. You're addicted to dopamine. So how do you get dopamine in a natural way?
Perfect. Yeah.
That will replace porn? And understanding that withdrawal from that is going to be difficult the first 3 to 5 days, especially. But you've got to substitute with other things that will give you, I look at as dopamine as it's supposed to be as an IV drip. Okay. What happens with porn, it's a bolus, a massive amounts of dopamine that hits you and floods your brain at once. How do you get back to getting that consistent drip that lasts you throughout the day and you feel good? Well, what do you derive pleasure in from hobbies? What do you enjoy doing in life? Get some sunlight.
Right.
Get outside and go for a walk.
Exercise.
Cold plunge, for example, especially cold water on the face actually increases dopamine. Exercise, especially weightlifting, increases dopamine. So I'm saying get more involved in the things that will replace dopamine that you got from porn that you now get in a natural way that's going to benefit you instead of hurt you?
So one of the things that I work with, when I work with people, I'm asking the question, you got to have a why. You got to have a why. Why quit? Why stop? It's pleasurable. Addictions are usually pleasurable until they get severe. But most addictions, people like their addictions. They're not calling us up unless they get caught, usually, unless they're in trouble, usually. So they like their addictions. So we're trying to convince them, especially to convince the 20-year-old that what you're doing, because they believe that no harm, no foul, right? One day I'll have a person. This will all go away.
Yeah, but kids, I don't know if I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if I 100% agree, because they like their addiction, but they don't. In other words, when you take a look at the constant loop, you click, you view, you stimulate, you climax, and then you do it again and again. Well, what happens? A lot of guys that I talk to, not a lot, but some of the guys I talk to will talk about how they feel extreme shame.
Good.
And guilt.
Mm-hmm.
They feel anxious. They feel anxiety. They feel almost depressed. They feel like they've lost self-confidence. Okay, and I think there's a term that young people use today. It's interesting, when they engage in porn afterwards, it's called post-nut clarity.
Post-nut clarity.
In other words, they experience pornography and the climax associated with that, but then they think to themselves, man, I shouldn't have done that. There's the morality part of it. I shouldn't have done that. I feel tremendous guilt and shame. They may further separate themselves in terms of connection with others. They don't engage with others, especially women. And I think that addiction can provide pleasure. I guess they continue to seek it, but at the same time, I do believe that men know this isn't good for me either.
I love that. That's what we're going to try to grow in people. This idea that they know that what they're doing is not okay. And that is a moral, maybe a moral compass, because they don't talk about it with others unless you invite them to.
Right.
So what's our plan? You have a plan for these guys. I'll have a plan for these guys if they come and see me. I'm going to start working with a couple of guys this week. I've got a plan for them, right? You have a plan as you draw these guys out. You had said, let's get you dopaminergic.
Dopaminergic.
I love that. Dopaminergic. And, but to live life to the full. So the guys I work with, I'll have a plan for them. Well, one of them, we have to address access. We have to say, do we put a filtering system on your phone? Do we put a blocker on your phone? And so again, that's part of the recovery industry, is that we can help with things like that. We encourage guys to be in a community where they will be able to talk about. The community is for the purposes of talking about their addiction. So there's not any. It's not like a men's prayer breakfast, even though those are wonderful, but that can be any conversation. But these groups that I'm referring to, the community that I'm referring to, it's purposeful in actually saying, how was your week? Meaning code for, hey, how'd you do? How'd you do towards zero? Right. So we get group, 12-step groups are great. Within every group, there could be good groups and not so good groups, but you've got the idea of, we want every guy in a group. We want them in a community, men with men.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for male mentorship.
Absolutely.
A huge advocate of that. Because when you've got an issue with porn, you don't talk about that with women, let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Like you talk about it. You can, when you do, you talk about that with men. But I think men need to come alongside men, ask the hard questions. Are you struggling with this? And talk about what we can do together.
That's right.
Maybe it's accountability. I think the answer, though, Kent, is men have got to step to the plate and help men. Women aren't going to solve this problem for men. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's got to be men stepping up for men. And I want men to know that it's not about shame. Right. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
In some ways, your chemistry has been hardwired and hijacked in order for you to feel like what you are today. But society as a whole, including women, have to understand that, in my opinion, and I think we're going to find this out in the next, here's one of the issues that I have, Kent. We're going to find out in the next 10 to 20 years, my prediction, and I have no scientific evidence to prove this, But we're going to finally see causation. And we're going to see causation from porn, why men behave and are checked out big time. And I think there's going to be causation associated with porn. So we as a society have to recognize that it's an addiction and not call it something else. And how do we help with addiction? How do health insurance plans help with addiction? How can a primary care help with addiction? How can, those involved in therapeutic community and mental health help with this addiction? I think we all have to have a hand in this, because I'm a little tired at my age of watching us serve the fringes of society. Less than 1% of our society is confused about their gender. But how much do we put in resources, time, and money into that?
Yes,
but
sir.
we can't seem to put anything into men's recovery. Well, we do some, but in terms of prevention, awareness, and how to overcome it, we put so little into porn and the addiction associated with it. We've got to get together as a society and say, why are men checking out? I believe one of the primary reasons is porn. And what can society do about this in order to correct the problem? Because I'm here to tell you, Kent, I'm 64. In the next 20 years, for example, we could see ourselves in a major crisis as a society.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate your your willingness to, be on the front edge of that. So that's awesome. That's awesome.
So Kent, let me ask you before we conclude, what if you're a young man today, for example, and you kind of struggle with porn,
Right.
you look at it 3 to 5 times
Right.
a week, you don't feel good about it.
Right.
It's basically it's destroying let's say your energy,
Right.
motivation.
Right.
It's your discipline per se. Where do you go? What do you do? I mean, is it something you have to automatically go to a therapist? What would your recommendation be to young men who are struggling with porn today?
Well, there's a lot of education out there. So I said before that there's I call it a recovery industry. So you could do a podcast, you could learn, you could Google search, I guess they still call it Google search, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you could search help. And there'll be books, and there's groups online. I would caution a little bit to where you're heading with that. You might still need somebody to kind of help you steer through the waters of that. But I'm very much, there is a young person who wants that help, there is help available, and there's literature, there's podcasts, there's groups. A lot of churches are beginning to offer groups that are possible helping in that regard. The encouragement would be, you can't do it alone. That's kind of the buzz parts of addiction, right?
Yeah.
We don't want you to do it alone. Maybe you can, but we think it would be better if you didn't do it alone. So you can make a phone call, call Brad, or at least check it out, because there is a lot of help. We want guys, if possible, we would like you to have at least a mentor who understands this stuff. We would love you to be in a group of either friends or a group that you can join. If you need therapy, you can certainly seek out a therapist who has a specialty in what we're going to call porn addiction recovery. So there's plenty of things available at this point.
I thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate. Number one, I appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
You talk about 96, 98% of what you do involves porn.
Yep.
I just, once again, I appreciate it so much, because I think it's a numbing mechanism. I do think it neutralizes men. I think it's a bigger problem than what society recognizes.
I appreciate you saying that.
I
Brad,
cannot tell you how much I appreciate
I want
that.
to acknowledge that, because that you would be a little bit rarer on that you're on this side of things talking to guys, and you are going out on kind of a limb going, this can wreck civilization as we know it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hyperbole, I don't believe.
Yeah.
It's an existential threat and we in society do not get our arms around and figure out how we can help men overcome this.
Well, I appreciate it. You had mentioned that you're writing a book, and one of the chapters is going to be on this. Mm-hmm. So you have a great passion for it. I've seen it today.
Kent, thank you again. I appreciate,
Brad,
like I said, so much. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Men, thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of it. I would appreciate it if you could comment, like, and subscribe. We're doing pretty well. I think last podcast we had about 78 1,000 views. So we're trying to improve on that. But anyway, guys, I hope it's beneficial. You learned something today. And if nothing else, reach out and get some help. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.
Thank you, Brad.
Take care.